All right, friends, welcome back. Today, I did the correspondence. Also, I do apologize. I'm losing my voice. I've been doing a lot of videos. We're gonna be having our Mead video. Is gonna have already been out by the time you're seeing this, and also I'll be releasing a new biography on Robert E. Lee at the end of this week. But now that we're talking about Robert E. Lee, now after the Battle of Gettysburg, a lot of people aren't aware of this. Lee did attempt to resign his command. And since I've been reading all these correspondences and these battle reports and so on, I decided I wanted to read Robert E. Lee's attempt to resign from command of the Army of Northern Virginia. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Again, my voice is a little shot. I'm actually not sick. I do a lot of talking at work, and obviously I make these videos. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope you're enjoying it. But before I get carried away, let's get into the video. Camp Orange, Virginia, August 8th, 1863. To His Excellency Jefferson Davis, President. Mr. President, your letters of July 28th and August 2nd have been received, and I have waited for a leisure hour to reply. But I fear that I will never come. I am extremely obliged to you for the attention given to the wants of this army and the efforts made to supply them. Our absentees are returning, and I hope the earnest and beautiful appeal made to the country in your proclamation may stir up the whole people, and that they may see their duty and perform it. Nothing is wanted but their fortitude should equal their bravery to ensure the success of our cause. We must expect reverses, even defeats. They are sent to teach us wisdom and prudence, to call forth greater energies, and to prevent our falling into greater disasters. Our people have only to be true and united, to bear manfully the misfortunes incident to war, and all will come right to the end. I know how prone we are to censure, and how ready to blame others for non-fulfillment of our expectations. This is unbecoming in a generous people, and I grieve to see its expression. The general remedy for the want of success is a military commander in his removal. This is natural, and in many instances proper. For no matter what may be the ability of an officer, if he loses the confidence of his troops, disaster must sooner or later ensure. I have been prompted by these reflections more than once since my return from Pennsylvania to propose to your Excellency the property of selecting another commander for this army. I have seen and heard of expressions of discontent in the public journals at the results of the expedition. I do not know how far this feeling extends in the army. My brother officers have been too kind to report it, and so far the troops have been too generous to exhibit it. It is fair, however, to suppose that it does exist, and success is so necessary to us that nothing should be risked to secure it. I therefore, in all sincerity, request your Excellency to take measures to supply my place. I do this with the most earnestness, because no one is more aware than myself of my inability for the duties of my position. I cannot even accomplish what I myself desire. How can I fulfill the expectations of others? In addition, I sensibly feel the growing failure of my bodily strength. I have not yet recovered from the attack I experienced this past spring. I am becoming more and more incapable of exertion, and am thus prevented from making the personal examinations and giving the personal supervisions to the operations in the field which I feel to be necessary. I'm so dull that in making use of the eyes of others, I'm frequently misled. Everything therefore points to the advantages to be derived for a new commander, and I the more anxiously urge the matter upon your excellency. For my belief that a younger and abler man than myself can readily be obtained, I know that he will have as gallant and brave an army as ever existed to second his efforts, and it would be the happiest day of my life to see it as its head a worthy leader, one that would accomplish more than I could perform, and all that I have wished. I hope your excellency will attribute my requests to the true reason, the desire to serve my country, and to do all in my power to ensure the success of her righteous cause. I have no complaints to make of anyone but myself. I have received nothing but kindness from those above me, and the most considerate attention from my comrades and companions in arms. To your excellency I am specifically indebted for uniform kindness and consideration. You have done everything in your power to aid me in the work committed to my charge, without omitting anything to promote the general welfare. I pray that your efforts may at length be crowned with success, and that you may long live to enjoy the thanks of grateful people. With sentiments of great esteem, I am very respectfully and truly yours, R.E. Lee, General Commanding Army, Northern Virginia. So, we see here, Lee is very, he's doing a lot of soul searching, so to speak. You know, his objective was to get out of get out of Pennsylvania. He wanted to make sure his army survived. And he wanted to make sure his army survived, but also he knew how this works. He felt all blame should be put on him. Everything, Lee is a very fascinating character of history. He is. And he has an honor to him. He has a nobility to him. And he did view himself at fault for everything that has happened. And, he was. He was the commander of the army. Every decision made was made by his orders. This wasn't like Lincoln with Burnside or Hooker or McClellan. Jefferson Davis put a lot of trust into Lee. He let him serve at his leisure. Whereas Burnside and Hooker, pretty much everyone but McClellan and Meade, they served at the president's pleasure. McClellan is the reason Lincoln became more involved, and then Meade was given a looser leash because Lincoln finally was confronted by people like Edwin Stanton and said, you need to stop. You need these guys to run the war. If they can't run the war properly, nothing's going to happen. We're not going to win. Now, so that's Lee's attempt to resign. I'm going to read you Jefferson Davis's response. Richmond, Virginia, August 11th, 1863. To General Robert E. Lee, Commanding Army of Northern Virginia. General, yours of the 8th instant has been received. I am glad that you concur so entirely with me as to the wants of our country in this trying hour, and am happy to add that, after the first depression consequent upon our disaster in the West, indications have appeared that our people will exhibit that fortitude which we agree in believing is alone needful to secure ultimate success. It well became Sidney Johnson, when overwhelmed by a senseless clamor, to admit that the rule that success is the test of merit. And yet there is nothing which I have found to require greater effort of patience than to hear the criticisms of the ignorant, who pronounce everything's a failure, which does not equal their expectations or desires, and can see no good results which is not in the line of their own imaginings. I admit the propriety of your conclusions that an officer who loses the confidence of his troops should have his position changed, whatever may be his ability. But when I read the sentence, I was not at all prepared for the application you were about to make. Expressions of discontent in public journals furnish but little evidence of the sentiment of an army. I wish it were otherwise, even though all the abuse of myself should be accepted as a result of honest observation. Were you capable of stooping to it, you could easily surround yourself with those who would fill the press with your laudations and seek to exalt you for what you have done, rather than detract from the achievements which will make you and your army subject to history, and objects of world's admiration for generations to come. I am truly sorry to know that you still feel the effects of the illness you suffered last spring, and can readily understand the embarrassments you experience in using the eyes of others, having been so much accustomed to make your own reconnaissances. Practice will, however, do much to relieve that embarrassment, and the minute knowledge of the country which you have acquired will render you less dependent for topographical information. But suppose, my dear friend, that I were to omit, with all their implications, the point which you present. Where am I to find a new commander who is to possess the greater ability to which you believe to be required? I do not doubt the readiness with which you would give way to one who could accomplish all that you have wished. And you will do me the justice to believe that, if Providence should kindly offer such a person for our use, I would not hesitate to avail of his services. My sight is not sufficiently penetrating to discover such hidden merit, if it exists. And I put to you the language of sober earnestness, when I have impressed upon you the propriety of avoiding all unnecessary exposure to danger, because I felt your country could not bear to lose you. To ask me to substitute you by someone in my judgment more fit to command, or who would possess more confidence of the army, or of reflected men in the country, is to demand an impossibility. It only remains for me to hope that you will take all possible care of yourself, that your health and strength may be entirely restored, and that the Lord will preserve you for the important duties devolved upon you in the struggle of our suffering country for the independence of which we engaged in war to maintain. As ever, very respectively and truly, Jefferson Davis, President, Confederate States of America. Davis's response. Now, this is something, there's been a lot of talk of Robert E. Lee lately. They removed the Lee Monument from Monument Row in Richmond, Virginia. Interesting fact, which sadly I don't actually touch on in my biography I will be doing about him. Lee was actually opposed to monuments in general, but he was very opposed to him having a monument. He didn't believe he should have a monument. He in his eyes saw himself as a traitor. He was a very loyal Union man. He left the Union because he didn't want to fight against Virginia. Again, we look at the world through our eyes, our 21st century eyes. We don't realize in the 19th century, the United States was, the famous line is, before the Civil War, the United States are. After the Civil War, the United States is. Because before the Civil War, we were a federation of states. Like as many of you who are familiar with the channel know, I'm a New Yorker. Nick, who appears on my podcast a lot, he's in Massachusetts. He's from Massachusetts. Trinity, who was on the podcast a few episodes ago, she was from Savannah, and she's not actually from Savannah. She's from the Midwest. Back then, yes, you were an American, but you were where you were from. The New York regiments were New Yorkers. The Pennsylvanians were Pennsylvanians. Famously at Gettysburg, there's monuments dedicated to the states. Um, so Lee is a very controversial figure, but you see the admiration that Davis had for Lee. Lee was probably one of the, until very recently, it's said Lee was the most beloved general in American history, both sides. When Lee surrendered at Appomattox, they didn't have to give an order to the army to not mock them. Soldiers saw Lee, federal soldiers, not Confederates, Union soldiers saw Lee pass, and they were just awed by him. He had this elegance to him. My favorite thing about the Appomattox scene is you have the old world and the new world meeting. You have Lee, who represents the aristocracy, the old, the Napoleonic era of fighting. And then you have Grant. Lee's in this very nice uniform with gold embroiders. He has his sword, which he didn't ever really carry. He looks very good. But then you have Grant come in. Grant's in a sack coat. It's covered in dirt. His boots are soaked in dirt. Because this, in a weird way, was a changing of the guard. This era is over, and now this era has begun. And, that was something I think Lee, towards the end of the Gettysburg campaign, because if you hear his tone too, he is a very, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. But Davis, the thing is, Lee was such a powerful figure to the South. He had a connection to George Washington through his wife and his father. He was a very prominent figure. And the fact that first of all, if he would have resigned, it would have been such a blow to the Confederacy's morale, especially with the fall of Vicksburg and the defeat of Gettysburg. It would have been crushing. And that's an understatement. But, Jefferson Davis, and again, I'd say this all the time when we do these. This is why I like doing these, because you see the perspectives. And the other thing is, when we look at letters between, like, Halleck and Meade, it's very, I don't want to say cold, but it's cold. It's very military. Lee was originally Davis's military advisor. He wasn't actually a general. A lot of people forget that about Lee. Lee didn't actually become a field commander in the way we know him until 1862. So we got to remember, he spent the first year of the war with Davis almost every day. He was his advisor. And it's really cool because there's a series called North and South. It's starring Patrick Stewart. And there's a scene, Patrick Stewart is a Confederate general. He walks into the Confederate White House, whatever it is, and there's a room full of generals and politicians talking to Jefferson Davis, and Lee is criticizing everyone, and Jefferson Davis goes, well, why are you here if you don't agree with me? And you need to realize Lee wasn't there as a field commander. Lee was there as an advisor. He was telling him, stop doing what you're doing. We're going to lose because of it. But I think it's interesting to see these perspectives. And, there's clearly an admiration Davis had for Lee. And, Lee was very old-fashioned. Lee was like, I'm done. I lost. It was a crushing defeat. Get someone better. And you know what? There's much debate if there really was anyone better. A lot of people on this channel, friends of Joseph E. Johnston, they think he was a very good commander. I also personally think P.G.T. Beauregard was a good field commander. I think, it's hard to say because you know what? The genius of Lee wasn't so much Lee. It was it was kind of like Meade in a way. He was able to delegate very well. And I think that's where his genius really was because he had great subordinate officers. He had James Longstreet. Early war, he had Thomas Stonewall Jackson. He had smart men on his staffs, and he knew how to use them properly. And I think, when you have someone like P.G.T. Beauregard, he was very, no offense to my French viewers, he's very French. He was very commanding. And Joseph E. Johnston, Johnson was the original Army of Northern Virginia's commander, but he had been removed when he got wounded at the Peninsula Campaign. But also, there's a whole political thing behind that. But, so this video doesn't go too long. Thank you all for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and comment. If you're new to the channel or if you're returning, please subscribe. Just please. There's a nice little red button right down there. Just click that button. It'd be awesome. Also, please donate if you're able to. I know it's hard times, but if you're able to, please donate to our American Preservation Fund. That money will be going to our national parks, our national battlefields, and our national aviaries to help them through these hard times, because sadly, they are the ones that get hit first when times are tough. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you in the next one.